Today, we're going to talk about freeing up the front end of the rowing stroke regardless of stroke rating. In one of my recent videos, which is a row along video of minute on, minute off work that starts at 20 strokes per minute, goes to 22, 24, 26, 28, and 30, 6 pieces, 1 minute on, 1 minute off, working on gaining more and more comfort up the ladder of stroke rating. We talked about staying long and loose regardless of stroke rating. And today, I really want to fixate on that idea of freedom around the front end of the rowing stroke. There are many coaching cues in rowing, and one of the coaching cues that I really disagree with is the idea of controlling the slide on the recovery of the rowing stroke. The word control elicits a response which is that of tension or muscular action. And we really don't want that on the recovery of the rowing stroke. After all, the drive phase is where we turn the light switch on in rowing, and the recovery is where we should be breathing out, turning that light switch off. So if we think about from the finish, controlling our way back up to the front of the slide, that suggests that we're using our hamstrings and quads to kind of navigate our way back into the front end. And really, what the front end is with the recovery is about timing. So it's about timing and freedom, and those go together. If we get into a good rhythm that allows us timing-wise to arrive at the front end of the stroke when we want to, then all we need to think about from the finish to the catch is freely setting ourselves on course to arrive exactly when we want to at the front end. Easier said than done, and much easier to do at lower stroke ratings. So if I'm just rowing along at 20 strokes per minute, it's easy for me to complete each stroke and float long and free into the front end. I can really turn it on the drive and float freely into the front end. And that's what we're going for. We like that contrast in the lower stroke ratings between the drive and the recovery. And you can see I'm just rolling forward until it's naturally time to press, making sure that I'm getting that handle nice and far into the front end of the machine with good posture. I'm not trying to get there as a turtle, but I'm sitting up, sitting forward, and rolling that handle long through the front end. And so for many of us, it's not really that hard on the lower stroke ratings and lower intensities to keep our length and keep our freedom through the front end of the rowing stroke. But as intensity goes up, as effort goes up, there can be, consciously or subconsciously, a tendency to not quite get all the way into the front end of the rowing stroke and to tense up and to anticipate the next drive and to create tension in our legs or tightness in our knees, as I like to say. You feel sort of tight in the knees right before the press, which is not great. A loose muscle is a fast muscle. It can contract. It's going to respond well. One that's already tense is going to have trouble contributing to that change of direction at the front end of the rowing stroke. So oftentimes, when we are at higher intensity, when we are trying to keep the machine going, when the blood is not in the brain and it's in the legs and it's in the body and you're not thinking very clearly, there can be a tendency to shorten up. There can be a tendency to anticipate the next rowing stroke. And so what can happen is that as the stroke rating goes up, we end up sort of stacking into the front end. That's one thing that happens. You can see there's a stop because I'm anticipating the front end, trying to control it, trying to go for it, trying to really get on it early, kicking my way out of the front end. And it's a little shorter, it's a little more tense, it's tentative, the rhythm doesn't look free. And conversely, what we want to be able to do is, as that stroke rating goes up, we can't get sucked into the chaos. We can't allow ourselves to tense up. There has to be a quiet confidence that even at the higher stroke ratings, If you compress all the way forward, you're still going to be able to take a complete stroke all the way to the finish. And so as the stroke rating goes up, what we really want to make sure of is that we don't get tight and we don't get tense, that we make sure that we're coming all the way into the front of the machine, smoothly, long, strong. And here we are, 33, looking better than we were a second ago at 25. And so by insisting on getting the length all the way in freely, we then have the entire drive to accelerate the handle. And the exaggerated statement would be, if I only allowed you to row half slide during a 2,000 meter piece, you'd probably think that was problematic. And you'd be right. If we were only able to go this far into the front end for a 2,000 meter piece, as opposed to being able to flow freely all the way through the front end for a 2,000 meter piece, which one do you think is going to elicit the better result? The more comfortable row. And comfortable is a relative term. This is rowing. Nothing's comfortable in rowing, but it can be more comfortable and it can be less comfortable. So what we're trying to do is establish a long, free, flowing rhythm that allows us to be as comfortable as possible. And I just exaggerated the idea of, well, what if we could only row half slide and those were the strokes we take? Well, what if you subconsciously are cutting your stroke off and you're rowing 7/8 slide and you're missing just that inch around the front end? You're missing that split second of pressure against the handle. You're missing that inch of distance every single stroke. In a 2K is what, 220, 240 strokes? You're missing 240 inches of work. That's not ideal. The whole premise here is that to the best of our ability, we need to be comfortable and confident without tension rolling through the front end of the stroke. And just for sake of juxtaposition, the catch and the recovery, although they are the ends of the stroke, are not equal in terms of our focus and intention. The finish of the rowing stroke is definitive. We row to an exact finish point every single stroke. So we press through, and that's our finish. And then we flow freely through the front end, to the finish, through the front end, to the finish, through the front end. So the front end of the stroke, conversely, is more of a conveyor belt. We're either rolling in or pressing out. There is no stop around the front end. There's no slowing down around the front end. There is no controlling around the front end. There is freedom and there is timing. Again, a little bit different than the finish, which is this is a definitive finish. If we drew a dot on the screen, my shoulder, my handle, it would end up at those two dots every single time. Not past it, not short of it, at that dot every single time. The front end, same idea. We want to keep that length, but there's that conveyor belt effect around the front end. We're either rolling in or pressing out. Either rolling in or pressing out. And so we're looking for that freedom around the front end. Again, if we get into our head and we're thinking, oh, it's high stroke rating, I gotta have high intensity, and you're thinking about the next stroke, before you've completed the recovery of the stroke that you're on, it's gonna be a shorter stroke. It's gonna ultimately end up being more work. You're gonna shorten up, which will cause a sort of snowball effect of continuing to shorten up throughout a given distance and a given piece. Once you start robbing yourself of that extra inch at the front end, it robs you of your ability to get the machine up to the highest speed possible, to get that fan spinning as fast as possible. And in getting the fan to spin as fast as possible across the drive, well, the fan speed stays elevated for longer, which ultimately gives you that split second longer to roll nice and freely all the way through the front end again. If we don't quite get to the front end and we take that stroke and we work and we do our effort, but we don't get the fan up to the highest speed, we now have less time to get forward to take the next stroke. And so we start to get bound into these smaller and smaller strokes as we go. And it's fractional. You won't even notice it. Just a little shorter each stroke. Then you're going to get tired. It's going to be a little shorter again, a little shorter again. And next thing you know, the piece feels way harder. It's much more difficult for you to hold speed. You don't feel like you are in charge of your rhythm. It just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel long, strong, smooth, rhythmic, which is all the things that we're going for. And in order to achieve long, strong, rhythmic strokes, there has to be a quiet confidence that, well, if I just roll all the way forward, then I'm going to get that entirety of the stroke. And in doing so, there's enough time to do it. I will accelerate the machine better. I'll have more time on the recovery, rinse and repeat. And so being an ambassador for length and freedom through the front end of the rowing stroke will ensure a higher efficiency overall on your piece. One of the benefits of making sure that we compress well is that the further that we compress, sitting up, sitting forward, compress our way in, the more we get to utilize our legs. And the legs are way stronger than your upper body and your arms. So as I was talking about earlier, if we could only row to half slide, and all we could do was row half slide strokes, we're putting way more emphasis on the hinge and the finish. Conversely, if we lengthen out, we can use our legs to generate power and speed, then lean back against that with our body, and then squeeze the arms to the body. Your legs are stronger, they're more durable, they're going to give you more power output over a longer duration. So you want to make sure you're not shortchanging yourself and not using your legs and utilizing your legs to the fullest. If you find yourself having trouble rolling all the way through the front end, we did a video on foot position, and I encourage you to watch that so you can really fine tune your foot position. We want to make sure we're not too low or too high, but if your feet are consequently too high, that can diminish your ability to fully arrive into the front end of the rowing stroke. So consider giving that video a watch if you are having trouble reaching the front end, even though in your mind you're very focused on the freedom of that movement. So the next time that you find yourself on the rowing machine at a higher intensity piece, really think about, do I feel tension in my legs? Do I feel tightness in my knees, specifically right around the front end of the rowing stroke? And if the answer is yes, make a concerted effort to free it up. Think about allowing the wheel underneath you to roll one turn further into the front end. You don't compromise your posture. You don't compromise your positioning. You just think, oh, I'm just going to let this wheel keep rolling until it's time to press. And if you take that mentality, the front end will present itself. You don't have to find it. You don't have to kick into it. You don't search for it. You just roll forward until you feel like, oh, there's the connection, and you can press out. So having that confidence to just keep nice and long through the front end, to stay free, not feel tension in the legs, not feel tension in the knees, not feel you need to get to the next stroke before fully recovering with the stroke that you're on. Really think, be proactive about relaxing. That's really what it is. Stay relaxed, stay long, stay well-timed within your rhythm at the front end. And that may require a little more freedom. And freedom can translate into faster. Yes, if we're going to roll one wheel turn further, or 1.5 or 2 wheel turns further, depending on how much further we need to get in the front end, we need to be faster on the recovery than we usually are. That doesn't mean freight training into the front end. It doesn't mean rolling in as fast as possible, waiting around, stopping there. No, it just means adjust from the arms out, body forward as we release. When we release, just think you set it adrift a little bit more freely so that you can arrive into the front end, enjoying that freedom fully into the front end, and then match it with the timing of the rhythm of the stroke rating that you are rowing. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share it with your teammates, share it with your friends. Please comment. I'd love to hear if this is working for you. And There is even more rowing content coming to you soon.